Hi, everyone. My name is Aspen Dudzic, and I am the host of the podcast Forestry Talks, powered by the Alberta Forest Products Association. And I am absolutely thrilled to be joined by Dr. Amanda Schoonmaker, a research chair at the Center for Boreal Research in Peace River. Amanda, how are you doing today?
Really good, thank you. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining me virtually from Peace River today. Tell me a little bit about the work that you're doing out there.
Um, where to begin? Uh, I have been with the NAIT Center for Boreal Research since August 2011. I'm doing research or applied research in a variety of topics, all with that kind of common goal of trying to grow, I guess, productive and diverse boreal forest. We work on areas that have received industrial disturbance and oil and gas type related disturbances, but we also have ongoing research in post-harvest sites, so sites that have been harvested and that are, we're trying to help either with reforestation or other aspects of, I guess, forest management, so density management, vegetation competition. It's a variety of things. It's quite varied, but I enjoy variability, much like the forest.
Yeah.
Diversity is good.
Yes, absolutely. And you know what? I'm actually really personally excited that you could join me for this because I am so fascinated by the incredible research and the science that's going on in the province here and how we're able to use that information to inform our management practices in Alberta so that we are sustainable. Your work is involved in things like land reclamation and reforestation and that kind of stuff. What's maybe one of the projects you're most excited about right now?
Can't choose one.
I'm asking you to pick out your favorite children, I know.
I love all my children.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's tough to say. I I might tell you briefly about two very different projects, and I'm interested for very different reasons. One project is an older study that's been ongoing now since 2016. It's actually a demonstration project in the land reclamation space on something called interim reclamation or temporary reforestation. So these are soil stockpiles. So in most resource extraction related disturbances, they strip surface soils, stockpile them, and then they often get grass seeded or herbicide sprayed for the years that they're going to just be doing their operations on site. And then that soil is rolled back for land reclamation. This practice, while it helps with mitigating erosion, keeping weeds off the soil, it doesn't necessarily result in a forest soil over decades. So instead of that kind of grass seeding, herbicide spraying, management practice, track packing the slopes, we have this demonstration study where we've done temporary reforestation. So we've planted this facility stockpile with many different densities of trees and shrubs and looking at vegetation development over time with the idea that we will demonstrate a more cost-effective approach because now you're not doing ongoing management of the site because the forest ecosystem is actually managing weeds, managing erosion. And at the end, you will cut that temporary forest down and use all that woody material, and then all of the roots and everything will be used in final reclamation. So you're actually going to be creating your reclamation material as you operate the site in that soil stockpile. So that project's 8 years old this summer, and it's as one of my former colleagues said, it's turning into a proper forest. So where we have high density, we have canopy closure now. Some of the trees are, I don't know, 3-4 inches in diameter. They're large, and you feel the diversity and the structural complexity developing in it, and it's really exciting to see things that start out small and get bigger. So that's it's one example because it's further along, and it's really cool when you can see these things out. But I think some of the other work that we're just on the front end on are some newer trials we're starting with two different forestry companies actually in the space of looking at vegetation management options. So we're looking at alternatives to use of glyphosate. Glyphosate has been around as a post-emergent herbicide treatment for a long time in Alberta and in other parts of Canada and around the world, but it has seen increased, scrutiny. And there's concerns. Folks are concerned with its use on the landscape. It has prompted some companies to actually discontinue use of it. So I don't want to get into the pros and cons of it as a tool. It was a tool that's been widely used for a long time, but for a variety of reasons, it's a tool that is maybe not going to be used as often in future by certain companies, almost certainly. So we're setting up new trials to look at dust off some old options. Like, all right, we haven't used some of these tools in a long time. What are our options? What are the pros and cons of either applying no herbicide or applying maybe a different formulation of herbicide, other types of site preparation that help displace vegetation competition? We're actually bringing some treatments we've been using in land reclamation into these post-harvest sites. So a treatment called rough and loose mounding, which has been used. It was coined by a fellow named David Polster. He's retired. He's from British Columbia and taught many seminars and workshops over the years to land reclamation professionals on the use of this treatment in land reclamation. And the cool thing about it is that it displaces that surface competitive layer, creates a really rough and loose surface, lots of different microsites, and you can get some competition control. So it's not long-term control like any mechanical treatment, but it offers some control. It's a more aggressive version of mini mounding or light mounding, which is often commonly used here in the province. So we're incorporating that into some of our trials, and it's kind of exciting to see, treatments from one discipline moving into another and back and forth, right? These things are fluid. So, I guess just excited to see those first sites go in this spring and watch that trial bake over the next 10 to 20 years, because the reality is that we will need to measure these things out for many years, both to understand those short-term implications as well as the longer term. So these trial sites are operational scale trial sites with permanent measurement plots, and we plan on monitoring them for, I don't know, as long as the companies want to continue supporting us monitoring out there, or till I retire and then someone else has got to take over, or whatever it might be. So
that's awesome, Amanda, and I can definitely hear and I can tell and see how excited and passionate you are about your projects. And it's really cool that you can't just pick one, right? There's so much incredible work that's that's going on there. One of the things that I think is really interesting about reforestation or land reclamation is that in many cases you're choosing the right tools for that specific type of forest ecology. And the forest ecology that we have here in Alberta, it's different regionally. It's different in comparison to other provinces and across the country. So what might be some ways that we need to consider the type of different forest ecologies that we have in the regions of Alberta that then allow us to choose the right tool to bring that forest back?
That's a big question. I want to kind of unpack that a little bit. So it's funny you describe it that way. I actually was speaking to a group. I gave a presentation earlier today on where we were at with a suite of trial sites looking at we call it, or collectively call it, legacy restoration of industrial disturbances. Restoration needs to be articulated a little bit better, and I'll come to that in a second. But this collection of studies is looking at historical disturbances on the landscape. So these were sites, often well sites, that were reclaimed and certified to older standards. They were the standards of the day. No one did anything wrong by doing what they did at that time. That's, was the letter of the law in those days. And the trouble is that many of these sites had been ceded to agronomic grasses. They hadn't received a really rough and loose decompacted treatment, and they've just been on the landscape now for 10, 20 years. So there's settlement and there's compaction, and we're not seeing forest ingress into these sites. So it does create challenges. And so we're, another area that we're looking at is, what treatments, what tools do we apply to these sites to kickstart forest development, restore functional aspects of a forest. And that's where we talk about legacy restoration. It's not restoration of necessarily exactly what was there before, but restoration of a functional forest. So it may be a different composition than the adjacent forest because the soils are different. Even if we go in and do some kind of mechanical site preparation, we do not have the exact same condition as the adjacent forest. So the expectation of having the exact same thing shouldn't necessarily be there. We need to put back what is compatible given the conditions we're facing, which I think goes to your point is we do have to consider conditions. You have to consider the climate you're in, the part of the province, right? I mean, it's very different in the Southern Rockies and into the foothills as it is into like how you would do things in high level. You have very different climate, different precipitation, different kind of growing seasons. So you do need to know your area and know those constraints. But I mean, I think basic principles apply everywhere. So if we're trying to grow trees, trees grow better when they're not competing with tons of other things right beside them. They are going to grow faster. So it's not that they're necessarily going to die if they're in competition, but growth rates are going to be tied to competition. Moisture is going to be a huge driver of growth in any system. So you're constrained by your climate. You can't control that. But what you can control is how you treat those sites. So you can create rough and loose conditions in that land reclamation scenario to help capture snow better, to loosen the soil, to improve drainage. Treatments that create these decompaction effects are going to be better for holding moisture on the site because you actually get better drainage into the site. So instead of the water just running off or just sitting at the surface because you have low hydraulic conductivity, because you have high bulk density and all these kind of compaction related issues, you actually can get better percolation into the soil. And then that water is better taken up by trees. So that's a mitigation strategy in a drought limited environment. And I mean, most of Alberta, one way or the other, is drought limited. It's a question of how much and in what year. I guess species are part of it. We don't have a terribly diverse species mix when it comes to trees in Alberta, but within the options that we do have available, we do need to consider where we plant them and under what conditions we plant them in. So is it appropriate? Should we be mixing lodgepole pine and white spruce in every reforestation site in northwestern Alberta? Absolutely not. We need to tailor our planting prescriptions to our sites. And even within the site, we have to think about eco sites and low areas and high areas. So in the silviculture kind of end of things, or as a forester, you do need to think about, targeting species to site conditions, site prep to site conditions, and being conscientious that way, because it does have an effect on how these things will grow and develop. And then layering on top of that, we have to consider future climate. So are these sites, are these systems going to be sufficiently resilient in 20, 40, 60, 80 years. With that in mind, so maybe we think this one species is really good for this site at this time, but maybe we should have a little bit of diversity in there to buffer for future change. This is something I definitely advocate for in land reclamation, because these systems are so varied, and what constrains growth in these sites in one year can be very different in the next year. And we don't always know what is going to be the best species in that year of establishment, because they're always interrelated. So planting diversity is going to be important. Diversity in species, diversity in genetics. I'm rambling on now, so I think I'll just stop talking there. I lost my train of thought.
I love it. I love it. It's great information. And I think one of the points that I'm hearing from you, and one of the things that I've certainly come to appreciate in my time working in the forest industry for the last almost 4 years, is how incredibly complex the ecosystems are here. And it's really amazing to me, all of the many different values that our forest managers have to be aware of and that they have to be managing for to ensure that we are going to have healthy, resilient forests for now and into the future. And I think that's why it's so important that we have great minds like yourself who are, really digging into some of these interesting topics like reforestation, so we can make sure that we're going to continue to have healthy forests into the future. I appreciate that there is a culture of continuous improvement here. And you mentioned that, one of the projects that you're excited about, there's some partnerships with some of the industry. Can you tell me a little bit about that and what's so important about that?
Well, I guess partnership with industry is, one of the cornerstones of how we operate research at NAIT, and how we definitely operate research at the Center for Boreal Research. So inherently, all of our work is applied in nature. We are mandated to do applied research. So that means we are working with industry. So I don't have any projects that do not have a external industry partner involved. It starts with a question. There's a challenge. So how can we do this better? How bad is it if I do it this way versus this way? Or how good? You can ask it both ways. It often starts with a simple question. And then you develop a project around it. So all of our research originates with an industry partner, and then we look often to leverage funding, either with federal or provincial sources to do more, to tackle other interesting questions onto this. But it always is with an industry partner, because that's our role and mandate, is to help do more, learn more, improve the way we do it, and do it effectively. We're going to spend money doing it, all of this. This all comes at a cost, but let's get the most out of that cost and do, as good a job as we possibly can on it, and not do it to check a box, but do it because it's going to be good in the for the future, for future generations to look at, right? Like the forest behind me. So I'm not going to be here probably to see that little patch of forest harvested, but you do these things well because someone else is going to benefit for it in future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, the forest industry, what I think is really remarkable about it is that it's been around for generations. We have some of the companies that are operating here in the province have been operating, family-owned business for more than 100 years. And our association itself, we celebrated 80 years just last September. So I think it is one of those sectors that has a history of, being here for decades. And I think that's, the sustainability of that business is because of that commitment to managing this resource. So we're going to have it forever and to make sure that it is healthy.
You have to manage for a lot of different resources, right? So, I mean, they eventually, folks are there to harvest trees for lumber, pulpwood, but you are challenged to manage for multiple forest values, and you can. These are not insurmountable tasks. They're doable. Like, as you say, we've been doing it for decades, and there's always room to improve and do some introspection on what's going good versus what could be done a little bit differently. But I do think the success of it and the success going forward is having people that are committed to applying the best practices that they know how to apply, and having those long-term goals in mind, and seeing beyond their own career timeline and seeing what it will be into the future. You're planning prescriptions on sites you're harvesting for someone who's going to be in your job in 80 years. So you're not going to be there to see it, but you do it because you know it's important. I have a Bachelor of Science in forestry, and before going into the Faculty of Forestry, this was at UBC. I knew very little about forestry, and had, you know, kind of the general public views on it. Harvesting is somehow, you know, has always these negative connotations, and it's all contextual. This is the reality is, you know, these things are contextual. At least there is an ability for it to be a renewable resource under the right circumstances and in the right forest types. I'm not going to say that it's the right thing everywhere. You know, my knowledge is really centered here in Northern Alberta. But, you know, it is a resource that does represent some ability for renewability. And that isn't something we have in all natural resource sectors. Some of these resources are truly non-renewable. So the fact that we have that here this is a good thing. You know, and it's just, we have to manage the resource appropriately and with many values in mind.
Absolutely. Do you have any kind of memorable examples or stories where you've seen some of the work that you've done be used in a practical application?
Yes. I don't know, memorable.
Because like I would say, you know, you dedicate so much of your life and your career to solving these complex problems. Like it must feel, you know, very rewarding when you get to see those years of research and science then being, you know, used in the field.
Yes, you're quite right. So yeah, I mean, it does, I think it does get used. I think there are examples in, you know, some of the work I've done in the oil and gas sector. I know they're applying some of these treatments, particularly as it pertains to, you know, focusing on more mixed species forests. So something I've been advocating for is not pushing too far to one end of the deciduous spectrum. So, you know, moving away from always planting an aspen dominated stand. Aspen is a difficult species to grow from a seedling. It doesn't always take very well on these sites. And moving towards a mixed species approach. So it's still in the mix, but having balsam poplar and paper birch in the mix, because they tend to tolerate the great wide variety of land reclamation scenarios that face us. So it does create a more resilient system. You know, seeing folks include native herbaceous plants in their prescriptions is, I think, another win for me on the land reclamation side, because native herbaceous plants offer another pathway to creating structural diversity in the understory. And many of these types of disturbances are prone to go very heavy to graminoids over time, depending on how we're doing things on that site. And adding herbaceous plants allows us to keep some structural diversity in there in the understory. We're seeing this in some of the data sets that we have, and then folks are starting to apply it in some situations. I think a recent example on the forestry side is one of these newer projects. It's this rough and loose mounding. The fellow that was treating the sites experimentally, you know, he wasn't quite sure at first. We did it at 2 different rates. The 100% rate's pretty intense, so might not do that everywhere. But you know, he actually used that treatment on a 30-hectare block because he had a challenge. So the site hadn't received a pre-treatment with the herbicide they were using, and he knew it was going to be really competitive. He felt that this rough and loose treatment was going to do a better job of grass sod displacement and competition displacement than the other kind of go-to treatment as light mounding. So he implemented this experimental treatment on a larger scale this winter. Because he had the chance to test it. So we don't have long-term data on it yet, but even just being, exposing someone to that and, shoveling them to try it in these harvest sites, once he got working with the equipment and got to see the effect on the ground, it gave him pause and he thought, well, you know what, maybe I'll try this on a bit of a larger mini trial in this other area because I don't have another chance for competition control. This will likely have better control than my other tools that are available to me right now. So I thought that was kind of cool because it's new to that company for sure. It's not that it's a new treatment, but it's new to them, and getting to see them implement it so soon in our trial work on a larger scale was neat. And it was because he was trying to solve a practical problem. And that goes back to your statement about the complexity and understanding site conditions, site limiting conditions, what my constraints are. He understood those and thought, this is probably the right tool for this particular situation. So those are the couple things off the top of my head anyway.
I think that's fascinating, and I'm super excited and eager to hear about how that trial turns out. And, it's always encouraging to hear about, we walk the talk. We are looking to incorporate best practices and to continue to use the best available science to improve our practices. So yeah, really excited to hear about that and see where that goes.
Okay.
Amanda, I'm curious, and this might be another really tough question, but what makes Alberta's forests unique?
What makes Alberta's forests unique? The people that maybe I don't know. I don't know if it's that when I think of Alberta, so I have lived, this is my disclaimer, I have lived really only in Western Canada. I've visited a couple places in Eastern Canada. But my, knowing forests and knowing these systems really is a Western Canada thing for me. So in BC and Alberta, when I think of the forests in Alberta, I actually think of the sky. So is something I missed when I lived in BC is you have a lot of mountains, a lot of hills. You don't have the sky, the big open sky, the way that you do here. Even if you're in the forest and you can't see the sky but all the time. But I guess for me, I would say it's the people that live here that make Alberta what it is. We don't all agree in the province, not by a long shot. But I do think most folks are well-meaning and want to, utilize the forest and do things in the forest that support their mental health, their well-being, recreational activities. We all have a different reason for liking the forest. I like it for the trees. Lodgepole pine or pine-dominated forests are my favorite forest type. I love the ericaceous understory. So this is in Alberta and BC, but we all have different reasons why we like the forest. But I think here, people do care about it, but they have such a diverse set of desires that they want to get out of it. It's kind of a negative way of saying it, but we have many different reasons for enjoying the forest and wanting it to stay in one way, shape, or form in this province. But I appreciate that diversity. That's a theme is diversity for me. I like diversity in all things. I think it's good for our population. It's good for the forest. We are constrained by different things, but we ultimately will make it a good place to be because we do want to see it function for all of those different values. So, I mean, this could be hunting, this could be fishing, this could be nature walking, could be for harvesting, could be for maintaining the integrity of different wildlife populations. Like we have many different reasons why it's important to us. So if we're trying to balance these many reasons together, that's probably going to be good for the forest because it will impose diversity on that system. I'm not sure I didn't really answer your question very well, but
I thought it was a great answer. I thought it was a great answer. And so for my next question then, I am going to take maybe a little bit of a jump here, make a little bit of a guess and and see what your reaction is to it. Because you shared at the start of this interview that you have a bachelor in forestry. And so now you've taken that and you use that you're now in, more of the science, the research aspect of things. And you mentioned that a lot of research is driven by questions. So I want to know, what were some of the big questions that drove you to move into research?
Let's see. So my bachelor, it's a Bachelor of Science in Forestry. I had to actually look at the diploma the other day. I always get confused. Is it Forest Sciences or Forestry? Because the Bachelor of Science that I undertook at UBC was a unique one. So they have their forest management stream, they have a conservation stream, and then they have this funny little stream in forest sciences, and it's geared towards people that want to continue in sciences, but it gives you a lot of the same forestry courses that the forest management students take and lots of space to take a diversity of other sciences, and they make you take organic chemistry and cell biology and all these other difficult subjects. But that degree program gave me a lot of broad exposure to soil science and tree physiology and plant identification and lots of really neat things. So I really appreciated that bachelor's program for that. And I guess, what got me into doing sciences, I think it started even before that. I have to back up for a sec. So I spent a couple of years at Capilano College in Vancouver. I, at that time, was going to go into nursing, if you can imagine this. And I was upgrading my biology because ironically, I never took biology in high school. I took physics and chemistry and calculus. And I was upgrading my biology, and I was on a wait list for a nursing program. And so I thought, I'll just take some extra classes and get my miscellaneous credits done. And in my second year, I took an ecology class. And this instructor was amazing. So he was an ecologist himself, he was near retirement when he was teaching this class. And he asked questions around ecology and explained competition and explained, symbiotic and all the different biotic types of interactions that are out there. And there's a big laundry list, and it's floated out of my head right now what they all are. But, he described it in such a way through example that really resonated with me. And I enjoyed the plant identification part of it, and just enjoyed learning about the ecology of these things. And that inspired me to kind of ditch the nursing degree stream and then go to UBC. And I did this bachelor's in forest sciences. In my undergrad there, I didn't want to just do, another summer of waitressing. I was a waitress for my entire undergrad and most of high school, actually. So, but it paid my way through school. And I don't want to do a waitressing job. I want to do something in the forest. So I got in as a summer research assistant in Dr. Suzanne Simard's lab. I was working with one of her PhD students, and I worked with him for 3 summers in north of Kamloops in interior Douglas fir forests. And they were looking at residual tree seedling interactions through mycorrhizal networks. And that work was amazing. I mean, that first summer, I was digging holes and filling in dirt and doing the odd veg survey, doing very menial things. But I loved being out there. I loved being in the forest, supporting and assisting with that research, asking these questions. And getting paid to do it. I thought, geez, I'm getting paid for this? Like, but what is going on? Like, this is, I never do this without getting paid. So I think it was at that point, that first summer, that I knew I needed to be in research in some way, shape, or form. And went and did a PhD after that. And maybe I had a moment of crisis towards the end of my PhD, because I love research. I love all research. I love science. I love asking questions. That's probably why I do so many different kinds of applied research, because it's not that I love one narrow area of research. I love all of it. I love the variability. But I had a bit of a crisis towards the end of my graduate school, because I wasn't feeling like the track of a university research program, that kind of professor track, was really going to be the right fit for me. I didn't want to be, more at a desk. And I mean, I'm at a desk quite a bit now anyway, but I get out a lot in the summer. So I didn't want to be kind of forced into that kind of role where I would get further away from being in the forest, or that's how I felt. So that is not everybody's kind of lived experience. And there's a lot of good benefits by being a university professor. You can, expose a lot of stuff to a lot of students, and I'm not discounting the value of that career stream, but it wasn't resonating with me. So, and then this job posting came up. So towards the end of grad school, this job posting came up, as it was called a research coordinator at that time. And it was in Peace River. And, my supervisors at the time were saying like, oh, I don't know, Amanda, I don't know if this is going to be a good fit for you. But I had a good feeling about it. So I took the job, and I'm really happy I did, because this job is amazing. It's challenging at times, and not everything has gone 100% excellent every day. It never does, but I am doing the job that it's a great job. I get to be outside all summer long, to the detriment of my desk and the workload that waits for me. I'm engaged in so many different projects. I see a lot of research, and I feel very fortunate in this role and in this calling. And I'm afraid I didn't entirely answer your question again, but I guess, to the point of the earlier question about, what got you passionate about research, it was holistically all of it, doing work outside in the forest. Fundamentally, I think I just like watching things grow. I think it's that simple. I think I just get so excited when things grow, like, oh my gosh, it's growing here under these conditions. Awesome. And then you see it somewhere else under some other kind of conditions or some other kind of challenging environment. Awesome. Again, I guess I'm always amazed, and maybe I'm just very simple-minded. I don't know. But I'm always amazed at the ways in which, we just set the conditions, and nature can do a lot. Like we need to set those basic conditions, and then don't touch it. Let the ecosystem sort it out, right? We've set it on that right trajectory. Now we need to watch it develop. So I think it's that desire to, see things grow in yet another weird and wonderful way, in a slightly different permutation from the other time, or watch you try to do the same thing again, but because you have different climate that year and you're a different region, you get a somewhat different result. So there's that as well, is that, that repeatability is an interesting thing to examine, and something I think we don't spend enough time valuing in the scientific world, certainly in the world of forests. We often, we can be, I guess, there's a negative connotation associated with, well, that's already been done. Well, yeah, it got done over here at this time in this place, but it doesn't discount the value of repeating that in other regions in other years. And we're incorporating that concept into a number of our newer trials because the interannual variability has huge implications for the magnitude of some of the treatment effects that we're looking at in our trials. So incorporating more of that interannual variation is going to give us more robust results. So science is about repeatability, right? We have to repeat these things over time. So in applied sciences, I get to do that. I think that's
fantastic.
About that.
Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic. And I love that really, a big part of where your passion lies is just being excited to watch things grow. I think that's so important. But this has been fabulous. I was so interested to learn about your work, and I'm interested to continue to learn more and see how some of these trials turn out. Dr. Schoonmaker, thank you so much for joining me for this interview. If anyone has any questions about some of the great work that you're doing, how can they get in touch?
Welcome to send me an email. I can be reached, it's A and then my big long last name, Schoonmaker at NAIT.ca. And happy to chat, give you the advice that I can give or what experience I have. But that's probably the most expedient way. And otherwise you find me out in the forest somewhere.
Fantastic.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Great. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay.
This series is proudly produced by the team at Road 55. Road 55 creates content that connects. For more information, check our website, www.road55.ca.